And it was so corny. And like my CEO was like, what is this? And I was like, trust me, just trust me. Okay. And it worked. It blew up. Like it got super engagement, millions of views on TikTok and on Instagram and all these comments.
Welcome back to Horizons podcast, where I convince marketing leaders to spill their secrets for the rest of us. I'm your host, Nate Desmond, and today I'm thrilled to be sitting down with Andrew Littlefield. Andrew is a content marketing veteran who's helped build audiences from scratch at multiple startups and established brands, including the robotic tiny homes company, Ori. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nate. Good to be here.
I would love to start at the very beginning. You earned your master's in music therapy before building a career in content marketing. How did you break into the field?
Yeah, so my story is kind of the cautionary tale, I guess, of the advice they always give to high school students about like pursuing what you love, and studying what you love in school. And at 18 years old, I was like, I don't know, I like band. So I picked a music major. And it was something I kind of learned that was really interesting to study in school. And I had a really good time, and then worked in the field for a few years. Quickly realized like this is not what I was meant to do for the rest of my career. However, I was working for like a small healthcare firm and ended up running their website and social media channels and stuff because I was the young person that knew how to do that. And then kind of realized like this is the most fun part of my job. This is what I actually like doing. I want to do more of this. And so I looked at, should I get a MBA or go back to school or what have you, and started looking at these programs and quickly realized that's going to put me $50,000 in debt, and I don't want to do that. So I started to just kind of break my way in without a degree. It's one of the reasons that startups attracted me is because in my experience, most startups, especially early stage ones, don't really care what you studied or where you went to school or anything like that. They're like, all right, can you do the work and are you willing to do the work? Then great, you're hired. And so what I did was send around a lot or just feeler emails and asking to write for different companies' blogs or organizations for free, just so I could build a portfolio quickly. I just email them and say, hey, I noticed you have a blog. And I pitched them a couple article ideas and say, I'd love to write for you free of charge. And they were like, of course, sure. So started writing those, and that built me a portfolio. And then honestly, doing a lot of like certifications that allow you to put badges on your LinkedIn. That worked like a charm, particularly HubSpot's. I took like HubSpot's like weekend certification thing that was not that hard. Watch a few videos and answer some questions, and suddenly you get to put a little certified inbound marketing specialist on your LinkedIn. And then applied for jobs for inbound marketing roles back when most people were calling it that. And they'd ask like, do you know HubSpot? I'm like, oh yeah, of course, expert, got the certification, and I'm like, meanwhile, I've never actually been under the hood in HubSpot. I've just watched the videos and stuff, but you learn as you go, you fake it till you make it, and it worked out. So that was enough that I got my foot in the door somewhere at a very small tech company in New York, and moved up to New York and took the job. 10 years later, still kicking with it. So
it's incredible. I feel like that note of like, you found out that you liked marketing in your first job because it wasn't your job, but it's the thing you did on the side, and you realized that was the piece you liked most.
Yeah.
It's almost the ideal way to discover your career, because no one knows before you start what you're going to enjoy. You've just got to try things and then see what sticks.
Yeah, especially like an 18-year-old. I'm like, I don't want to be a business major. That's boring, blah, blah, blah. I used to so my dad was an engineer, definitely had like a 9-to-5 office job. And I was always like, I don't want to have a desk job. I don't want to have an office job. That sounds boring. And then you actually start working a little bit. You're like, oh, actually, office jobs are awesome. That's great. Like, I don't have to be on my feet all day. I get to drink coffee and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, sign me up for the office job now.
It is so
I
true.
miss being in an office. I don't like all remote work.
Same, actually. I very much prefer being in the office.
At least like the flexibility, like 2 or 3 days a week is nice,
Yeah. I'm curious, going to that first job that was not marketing, but became marketing. If I'm not wrong, that was the George Center?
Yes. So that was a small private healthcare practice founded by a woman named Jamie George. And I was like one of her early hires. And so she was like interested in like growing the business, bringing in more clients and finding new contracts and stuff. And she had a very like, it was a second career for her. And she had come from like a very like sales and business background as well. And so I did learn a lot from her, just like in how, sales, marketing, and business works, like the very basics, like what is I didn't know she called it like a CRM, but she had, her lead sheets and things like that we were tracking and blah, blah, blah. And So it was like a small business marketing 101, which is a great way to learn, if you're trying to break into this field rather. I feel like working for a small business that's very traditionally or has traditional marketing needs is a great way to learn and kind of sharpen your skills more so than startups that are trying to make a big splash and do different things. It's easier to learn the fundamentals of the simple traditional model, I feel like.
And you not only learned the fundamentals, you actually increased the number of site visits by over 300%. What was working for you in that initial role?
Publishing. This was 10 years ago when not a lot of companies were doing that. This was the nascent days of HubSpot, where they were really pushing publish on your blog, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was just doing that all the time. I've always loved making things. That's been what I like to do. And, high school projects, when you get assigned to make a video or something, that was my favorite type of homework. So it'd be like, I just would do that. It'd be like, okay, so we're working with this, like, let's make a video about that. Let's publish a blog. Let's do a guest post. I started writing a lot of, or doing some really basic like infographics and stuff. Infographics in those days, oh my gosh, they could just take off so easily.
They really did.
I miss that. And then you would like share them with other publications. And so we're in this particular role, we worked a lot with children on the autism spectrum. And so I reached out to the organization Autism Speaks and got them to allow us to publish a guest article on their blog with an infographic that linked back to our website. And that just blew up because tons of people were searching for that. I got really good search results. And it was definitely a early moment for me of a lot of experimentation and figuring out what works and kind of leaning into some things. And also a lot of things you read out there. There's a million content marketing advice blogs and how to do what, this, that, and the other. And I feel like half the time, a lot of that advice doesn't work at all. And you try it and you're like, whose idea was this? This is terrible. And so you try to on your own figure out, oh, this aspect really, really worked well. This didn't work so well. I'm going to lean into this more. And then also it changes every single day. Yeah, I'm just saying oh, I miss the days we make the infographics and those really take off, because now that's not really working so much anymore. You have to just continually try and learn things because the internet's this living, breathing organism that's constantly evolving, and what you were doing yesterday is not going to work tomorrow on any of the algorithms. So that's an aspect I really liked about the job, is that it's and something that I feel like didn't hold me back as a result of not studying marketing in school, was because when I was in college, none of these things were even being talked about. I mean, Instagram was 2007, 2008? When did Instagram start?
Something like that, right? It probably didn't even exist, or barely.
Yeah, it didn't exist yet.
MySpace
I'm
days.
showing my age. Like my freshman year of college, I was mostly excited to sign up for Facebook because you still had to have an edu email address to get that. So, like you learn, not to disparage studying marketing or business or anything in college. I'm sure you learn a lot, and I put yourself ahead of the curve, but it's definitely, things change so quickly and so much that I don't feel like you need to feel that you can't do it if you didn't study this in school, because what I would have studied 10 years ago in school, 15 years ago in school, is completely different from what's working now and the realities we're in now.
And there are two directions I want to take that. One is like, what are the principles that are consistent across all these different pieces? But before we go there, you've had some really big successes, from that first 300% increase to growing Ori's, I believe, his Instagram following to 1.2 million followers, to landing your startups in the New York Times. How do you think about today? Like you mentioned that Ori example of a single infographic that drove a lot of traffic. Do you feel like you now know the recipe such that everything you do can be a big success? Or is it a matter of trying a lot of different things and you know that eventually one of them will be a success?
Absolutely not. I do not know the recipe for success. I wish I did. No, it's my most consistent advice in everything content marketing that I always try to tell every job I'm at or client I work with, is getting what I call at bats. So apologies for using a sports analogy, but in baseball, you just need you if you're successful 1/3 of the times you're at the plate, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame, right? You just need to get up there and take lots of swings, and that's, after a while, your averages go up. And so that's what I'm constantly trying to get people to do in the role that I do, because I feel like a lot of people are very precious, or a lot of brands want to be precious about what they put out there. Especially a lot of brands want to be precious about what they put out there, but larger brands, let me restate this. Let me think about this a little bit, because it's like, if you're a large brand, an established thing and a big audience, yes, you need to be careful and consider like what you're publishing and does it fit the brand voice or the style guidelines. You can afford to take a lot of time and effort and money to make sure things are really polished before they go out there. If you're a small startup, I don't think you, number one, need to or have the luxury to be super precious about what you put out there. Number one, there's just not much risk to putting out something that's going to flop if you're a small brand, because you don't have the audience anyway. No one's going to see it. Delete it later. Who cares? But unless you're putting out lots of different things, how are you ever going to know what works? And so I've always loved working with companies that are very willing to let me try some things that are silly and goofy and probably going to flop, because that's the only way you're going to figure out what to lean into and what to move away from. So with Ori, it was all about just putting out daily content on social media and trying different aspects of it and seeing what works. And then something would work for a while and then stop working. And it was just all about like being an observer of what was working out there already and saying, okay, what can I do about that? And one of my favorite examples of this was, I can send you the link later. Maybe you can cut to it or something in the podcast, but we were just doing a lot of like little short clips of like the furniture in action, and that tended to do really well. And we'd speed it up so it was engaging. And then we had this period where it just went really dry. And it's so funny. It's like I was in a drought. I was in a dry spell. When you're in baseball and I kept getting to the plate and like striking out, and I was just like, did I lose the juice? Did I lose the magic? Like, why is nothing taking off now? Like, I can't get a hit. I was like, I just need a hit. Give me one. For weeks, everything I was putting out was just not getting above like 2,000 views. And then I started to notice these like videos that were taking off where the person holding the phone was not involved in the action. They were observing two people interacting, which that was very clearly like a corny stage scripted interaction. Those like food videos where the person's like, check this out, I'm gonna pour a pile of cheese on the counter, like just these ridiculous things that just make your little like engagement brain like fire for a second and watch it. So what I ended up doing was having my boss and my coworker act out this horribly cheesy script. I feel so bad for doing this to them, where they, the friend is coming to the new apartment that has the cool bed, and he's like, hey man, welcome, come over, we're gonna watch the big game. And my boss like is not a sports guy, and so he kept saying like the game, and all the comments are like, that man has never watched a game in his life. It was like hilarious, and it was so corny. And like my CEO was like, what is this? And I was like, trust me, just trust me, okay? And it worked. It blew up. Like, it got super engagement, millions of views on TikTok and on Instagram, and all these comments. And like, they're not like, wow, this is really cool comments, but like there's a lot of like, wow, that these people act like robots and stuff. And I'm like, okay, fine, that's engagement. Thank you for the engagement. And people see it, and it got us a lot of website visits and a lot of conversions. And it was just like it was an experiment just to see, like, I think this could work, and it's going to be a little cringy. Work with me here, And I love that my CEO saw it and was like, initially didn't like it, and I was like, I'm like, I have an idea, like, there's a plan here. Trust me, if you'll work with me. And he was like, okay, yeah, I trust you. So yeah, it was pretty funny. And then other times stuff doesn't work. I started doing these like live stream Fridays where I was like trying to do stuff and they didn't work, and so I just stopped doing those. Like for that example, there's 10 other examples of something where I was like, let's try this, and it just did not work at all. And I was like, okay, forget it.
How many at-bats would you aim to get in a week?
We were posting daily for the initial build, if not more. As like a one-man team, that was pretty much all I could do. But I don't think you can post too much on those channels, honestly, because they're algorithmic now. They're not chronological timelines. So that's another thing that I think people have this kind of stuck mentality of 10 years ago is, oh, I don't want to post too much because then I'm going to show up on my followers' feeds too much and they're going to unfollow me because they're tired of seeing my stuff. It's not email, Email, that's smart because you don't want to blast people's inbox all the time. All of your social feeds are algorithmic now. So they're only seeing it if they watch your stuff and engage with it regularly. You could post 3 times in a day. That doesn't mean that your followers are going to see all 3 videos. Unfortunately, it means that the mysterious black box of the Instagram algorithm is going to decide what even your own followers see. And so I really don't think there's like a limit to like posting too much, other than just maybe not reaching a point of diminishing returns and how much time you're spending on it, I guess. But if you have a lot of ideas and you're trying to figure out what's going to work, I don't see why you wouldn't want to throw a lot at the wall and see what sticks.
And now a word from our sponsor. It's me. I'm actually not taking any sponsors in season 1, but I just wanted to say thank you for listening. It's been such a joy recording these episodes, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I have. If you would like to support the podcast, the single most impactful thing you can do is leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. This will help new people discover the podcast. And if you have someone in your life who's passionate about marketing, send this their way. They'll probably love diving into these insider tactics and stories. With that, back to the conversation. And something that stuck with me from that story you're just sharing is you had something that worked, it stopped working, and you had to iterate for a while to find the next thing that worked. Presumably that also stopped working at a certain point. Mm-hmm. When you strike gold, how long do you expect that vein of gold to last before you need to find a new vein?
Oh man, it honestly sounds like being an addict. It's you hit something that's working, you're like, yes, I got the juice, all right, and then it goes, and you expect it to last. Initially you expect like, oh, we got this figured out, blah blah, and then it goes away and you're just like jonesing and itching and you're just like, I need another hit. It would vary, man. Like sometimes you could just keep doing that same style over and over again and just keep getting hits and it was great. And then other times it'd be just a one-off and you're like, man, like I just got lucky there. And then you're stuck just figuring out like, what was the thing that made this stick for people? And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of like the Instagram, TikTok environments now and for a while, because it's all just like that, what I call lizard brain content. I had another founder who had a lot of success, not that I didn't work with, when we were in a drought, that I asked for some advice and he was like, it's all about content that makes people say, what the hell is this? Basically, like you just need someone to like they're just swiping on their phone and there needs to be a split second of like, huh? Because that makes them linger for 0.2 seconds longer, and that triggers the Instagram algorithm to say, okay, someone's interested in this. And then it gets them to watch a little bit more. And they show more of your stuff. They show it to more people. The problem with that is it ends up just people gaming that and just making these really annoying, low value content that, just intentionally tries to confuse people in order to get them to stick around. I hate that. And so I'd end up having these, like, to get back on the main line there, these videos that were successful and I thought I knew why, and I would try to replicate it and it wouldn't work. And you kind of have to figure out like, oh, what I thought was the thing that was sticky there wasn't actually what was sticky. I don't know how to describe that. It's like you start to, when you're doing an experiment, ideally you only have one independent variable, so that if I change the independent variable, that's what's causing the outcome. That doesn't work that way in real life. In social media, there's 16,000 independent variables in every little piece that you're publishing. And so I may have made something with a hypothesis that if I use this caption or this emoji in the caption, or we frame the video this way or make it this long, that's what's going to, get people to be hooked in. And unfortunately, sometimes what I thought was the thing that was causing the hook was not it. And then you're left going through all these other independent variables of thinking like, was it the caption? Was it this? Was it that? Was it none of these? And we just got lucky. Like, what was it? And then trying to figure out which of those things is actually the secret sauce so that you can do it again. There's been a lot of times in my career too, where I've had something successful and then my boss is like, this is great. What was the secret? And I'm like, I'm still figuring that out. Like, ask me next week. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you.
You're a scientist, except physics is changing while you're experimenting. So trying to understand the laws of physics.
And the entire time, it's like, if you fail, the company falls apart. No, not bad, but like, I don't know, like, there's definitely room for like experimentation and failing and stuff like that in startups, but it's, I don't know. I don't know.
On that note, how much do you think a company should treat content marketing as a primary channel or sort of a extra additional channel, given the fickleness of knowing what will work and what will not work?
I'm definitely not one of those like content people that says all you need is content marketing, oh, the paid channels are dead, blah, blah, blah. That's ridiculous. Like, you're always going to be paying for advertising. That's why content even exists, is because all these channels want to sell ad space on their channels. So even still at Instagram and things like that, even if you have a little bit of organic success, they want you to spend money. They know you're a business page. They want you to spend money. And so I'm convinced, honestly, that, they'll give you a little viral success early on and then throttle it to encourage you to spend to get in front of an audience. Pardon me one moment. So you're always going to have paid channels. I don't think you'll ever just get rid of that. I think that the fundamentals of marketing are still there. Maybe your brand isn't like an out-of-home advertising type of brand, but maybe it is. Maybe you are buying billboards and subway ads and who knows what else. You're always going to have, I think, paid search campaigns, or you should be having paid search campaigns. You're always going to need paid social campaigns. But I do think content is the place where you get to be a bit more experimental because the stakes are lower. I'm not spending $100,000 on a billboard experiment. That's a big ask. Although I did write about once a brand that designed a Times Square billboard overnight because they found out last minute about some overstock from a salesperson and they were like, yeah, I can give you this deal for this Times Square billboard for some insanely low number, but we need the creative by tomorrow. And so, his whole team like stays up all night, making this campaign and figuring out and making the art and sending it. But then this small brand ends up getting a Times Square billboard, which is obviously really exciting for them.
Wow.
But those are the channels where it's harder to justify being experimental because you are spending hard budget on that. Not to say you're not spending hard budget on content, but
it is a different thing.
It's just a different, yeah. It's in content. It's like you're spending money on this big pie, and I'm like, I know some of these slices are great. I don't know which ones necessarily, and you just can't afford to do that with, play ads or market search ads. There's a much more of a scientific approach to those, I feel like, than in the content world, which definitely has, should be data driven and scientific and things like that, but you're able to be a little bit more artistic with it, maybe. So yeah, I think those are always part of your mix. I think what you have to encourage non-marketing founders or, decision makers is that you need to be willing to allow things to marinate and develop a little bit before they are going to start taking off.
Fair.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about how much things have changed. Like we had MySpace and I forget what we had before that, like AOL online. Things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. And so you have to constantly be adapting to the new thing. What are the principles that you've noticed are consistent in terms of what it takes to uncover the next new thing before everyone else does?
Let me think about that. I would say even back then, you're still in a place where it's not necessarily clear what's going to be popular and what's not going to be popular. Earlier on, it was much harder there was a higher barrier to entry for creating any kind of content for brands or individuals or anything. And so there just wasn't as much competition. There wasn't as much noise in the system, but you still didn't know if you made something, if it was actually going to be popular or resonate with people. You might have a hunch that it does, but that still wasn't a guarantee of success. So I still think this fundamental of being willing to try things and take at bats, even if those, in today's modern world, it's hundreds of at bats, you're posting something every single day. Back then, maybe it was much, much lower. But I still think you needed to, it's the age old problem of any creative writer, a musician, or whatever, is they have all these ideas, they're working on something, but you got to put it out there. And that's the scary part because people may criticize it and not like it or whatever. You can't just sit on your ideas forever. Otherwise, you're not really a writer. You're not really a musician. You're not, you've got to put it out there. And I think the same, it resonates with content marketing is, you can't sit on these ideas forever. You have to put them out there. So even if it's much harder to make these things in the MySpace days or AOL days or what have you, you still need to put those kind of strange ideas out there to see what takes off. I always like thinking back to earlier internet days of what I thought was funny and popular. And it's just so strange and random. And I always want to know about the person who made it to see what was the idea here. Like, how did this happen? And usually it's like, I don't know, I just had some dumb idea and I did it. And I had a million of those dumb ideas. And this is the one that people thought was funny, or, viral or cool yeah, it's just, who knows? How could you ever know? I remember like early internet days, the hamster dance website, which is just, do you know this?
I don't think I caught that one. That
Oh,
sounds
man.
incredible.
No, this was like when I was like in fifth grade or something like that. This was like early internet days. And it was basically this website with a bunch of GIFs of little like animated hamsters dancing, and then like a annoying earworm song that would just play over and over again. And it was just like, it was like, welcome to hamsterdance.com. And it was like one of the early like viral things on the internet where people would just be like, have you seen this? And like show it to you. And for, back then that was this revolutionary thing, like, wow, look at that, little dancing hamsters. And I was trying to write an article about the origins of that website I was doing content marketing for a software brand called Saros, and it was design software. And so a lot of our content was just about marketing content, because basically we were selling this design software to use for marketing content. And I really wanted to find the creator of the Hamster Dance website and like talk up to the person who had the first viral website, and got to a dead end when I realized that the person was like a little crazy and like was not willing to talk, and maybe had like a sadder story at the end of it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's where that tale ended, But it's, I don't know, these early days, you still don't know what works. There's no looking at it and saying like, this is gonna be a hit. You're just kind of experimenting and trying little things and trying silly things, and sometimes they're going to work really well and sometimes they're not.
I love how much it sounds like there's a lot of artistry in this, that you just need to try things, be creative, push the boundaries of what you think is going to work, and then get more at bats. On that note, do you see anything that someone could do to achieve more at bats when it comes to content marketing?
I think the biggest barrier there is just getting buy-in from the decision makers to just trust you that it's okay to put out some things that are a little different, maybe don't work. And often the way I frame that for decision makers is, we can delete it later. Don't worry about it,
Smart.
And also that if it's not popular, not a lot of people are going to see it. So what do you got to lose? I still think some people get stuck on looking at like their Instagram profile page, and they want it to look really clean and consistent and et cetera, et cetera. Again, if you're a big brand, maybe that makes sense. If you're a small startup, no one is looking at your Instagram profile. They see your content when it's showing up in their For You tab or something like that. Then they might go and click at your profile and look at it. But I just have a hard time believing that a lot of people see something that they find engaging and then click on the profile and they go, the brand's guidelines are not being followed here. If you're Nike, then yeah, it's really important for your landing pages to look good. If they're not, then try it, and the worst that can happen is it doesn't work and you delete it and not many people saw it. That's fine. So I think that's the biggest challenge to getting those at bats, is buy-in from the people who make those decisions. But they have to be willing to trust you, and hopefully they do, because they're hiring a content person. If they're the type of brand that's not willing to do those experiments, and they're probably not all that interested in investing in a content strategy anyway. Yeah, as far as like in an office setting, that would be the biggest challenge. And then you have your own restraints of feeling, maybe embarrassed isn't the right word, but just that paralysis of, I'm not ready to put this out there yet. Like, I have this idea, but I'm not really ready for it yet. And I still struggle with that. I have a million YouTube channels I want to start, that I've made names and logos for. And I'm like, I'm not ready to put that out there yet. You just got to do it. You got to put it out there. Like, it's going to be scary. But if you never put it out there, then you never know. So there's my own decision maker in my head that's like wants things to be perfect, and kind of have to quiet that voice and not let perfect be the enemy of good. So, yeah.
I so feel that. I feel like one of the recurring things I've noticed in life is you have a dream. They're like, oh, this would be amazing. I'd love to build this company, launch this podcast, in my case, do something. And the dream in your head sounds wonderful. But then to actually take a step to do it you have to almost sacrifice the dream and say, well, I might, in facing reality, find out that this isn't possible or this thing doesn't work the way I think it will. You have to give up that dream in order to make the dream come alive. And that's painful.
And you know what the best way to do it is to tell lots of people that you're going to do it, so that then you have like accountability. Feel like, oh, now I got to do it because I've already committed to it. And I have a personal story about this very recently where I I was working a full-time contract after my time with Ori ended, and then that contract came to an end in November, like late November. So I had some money saved up, and I was like, well, no one's going to bring on a new consulting deal in December. And not many brands are hiring in December. Everyone's going into power save mode. And so I was like, what should I do all December? You know, I don't want to just sit around New York and I don't know. And so I'm a big cyclist. I've wanted to do more what they call like bike packing trips, where you put your entire life on your bike and you go off to explore the world. And, you know, I love watching those YouTube videos. I want to do that. And I've done like small, like little overnight camping trips, you know, but I've never done like an extended trip before. So of course, you're in New York, it's winter, you have time off. Where do you go? You go south. So I had this idea to go to Jacksonville, Florida, and ride Jacksonville, Florida to Key West. So I'm telling this to my group chat of friends, my bike friends. And one goes, Jacksonville to Key West, you know, like forget that. You'll go all the way to Key West from here, from New York. And I'm sitting there, well, you know, at first it's like LOL. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, And so I start building little maps and I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's ride to Key West from New York. I'm going to do it. So I attempted to do that in December. I set out on like December 6th or 7th with like an 80-pound loaded up bike with everything I needed to live for 5 weeks. Camp stove, inflatable sleeping mat, tent, clothes. I even brought a wetsuit because Florida boy, I love the beach. And so I had this idea that on this ride, I'm going to stay on the coast the entire way. And I wanted to jump in the ocean as many times as I could. And it was like in the 30s still up north. And so I brought a full wetsuit so I could put it on and go jump in the ocean and not freeze. So it was like this heavy loaded bike. And it was just one of those things where I was just like, I have this idea. I think I'm going to do it. And I told a lot of people about it beforehand. I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to ride my bike to Key West. Yeah, I told all my friends, like, yeah, you're not going to see me next week. I'm riding my bike to Key West. And that kind of forced me to have some accountability for when the day came. And I was like, now I got to go. Because like, if I show up to the group hang next week and like, I thought you were going to be Key West, and be like, I chickened out, you know? You just got to do it. So that's what I did. And I set out to do it and kind of quickly learned that I was not going to be able to accomplish my original goal. I had planned out to do, you know, like 100-mile day every couple days, because I've ridden 100 miles in a day, plenty, you know, but not with 50 pounds of stuff. And I had a friend who has done this before, and she was like, you're going to have a bad time if you try to do that. I think you're trying to do too many miles. I was like, it'll be fine, you know? So day 2, I'm trying to do 105 miles and I get to like 90 miles in, I stop to eat and I'm just absolutely busted. My ankles hurt. I'm tired. And I'm like, I can't do it. It's dark already. Like, I can't do another 15 miles. I have to reevaluate my plan here. These 100-mile days are not going to work. So then I had to completely reevaluate and rearrange my trip and agree to take rest days and shorter mile days and kind of give up on this continuous line all the way to Key West. I ended up doing New York to Wilmington, North Carolina via the Outer Banks. Paused for Christmas and went home for Christmas, and then rented a car, put the bike in the car, drove to St. Augustine, Florida, and then did St. Augustine to Miami Beach. So yeah, I had this idea. I thought it was going to work, and then I had to change my plans a little bit because I realized as I was doing it, like, oh, this isn't quite going to work the way I thought it would work, you know? And then I got to Miami Beach and, you know, it'd be like 2 more days to Key West. I was sitting there on the beach, you know, with a frozen drink in my hand, thinking, do a couple more days and go to Key West, or I could just kind of hang here in Miami Beach and enjoy this cool Art Deco hotel I'm in and some more frozen drinks and just relax. And I was like, I'm just going to do that. I'm good. So I did 1,100 miles in 4 weeks. It was just plenty, but did not hit quite my original goal. But the moral of the story is, if you want to ship work, tell lots of people about it so that you have the peer pressure and you'll be embarrassed if you don't actually follow through.
And that is just an incredible achievement in itself. The most I've ever done in a day was probably 80 miles, and that was painful.
Yeah.
Doing 1,100 in 4 weeks or 5 weeks is massive. That is huge.
Yeah. There's a really funny viral video from like a year ago. Some guy like wrote this song. It was like, I love to do this. This is fun. I choose to do this every day or something like that. Like basically like the little song you sing in your head to convince yourself that you're having a good time. And that's definitely how it felt some days where I'm like, I'm having so much fun. I chose to do this. Some people will take 5 weeks off and fly to Bali and stay in a yurt or something like that. I'm like, no, I'm biking through the rain in Northern Virginia. Yay. But it was off. It was worth it. In the end, it was worth it.
It is. It is. These challenges that we put up for ourselves are always worthwhile in doing, even if we realize at the end, like, maybe I don't need to do the whole thing and I can just rest in Miami Beach for a few days.
Exactly.
I want to go back to not quite the beginning, but the first job you did that was fully marketing. You were the first marketing hire at We Did It. What were your first 90 days like as that first hire? First time you were the only marketing person and first marketing person at that company.
That I'm still friends with the two founders there and still work with them some, but I think they would agree that all of us were flying by the seat of our pants a little bit and it was a little crazy. So I don't think they would be offended by me saying that. It was definitely an interesting place to be. It was really small. It was like, I'll say fewer than 15 employees, and probably 5 of those were engineers in South America, working remotely. So the office was, the 2 founders, 3 founders. So it was like a sales founder, the people manager founder, and the tech founder. And then the sales team had 2 or 3 people. We had a customer support person, and then you had me. So it was this very small, scrappy team working out of like a shared incubator office space run by NYU in Brooklyn. This was my first startup job, right? And I got the job despite showing up to the interview in a full suit and feeling like a real nerd because I was like young and didn't know startups too well. And I was like, what do you wear to an interview? You got to wear a suit. So I showed up in the full suit to this kind of grungy incubator office where everyone's just in shorts and hoodies and stuff and feeling very out of place. And they definitely made fun of me for it later. Like when they offered me the job, like, we're going to offer you the role despite the fact that you showed up in a full suit. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So the question was, what was that like? Or what was the early
what were
days
your
of that?
first like 90 days like?
The first 90
role?
days. It was a lot of realizing I now had to do what I maybe overpromised in the interview process of like, oh yeah, I know that software. I'm like, crap, now I actually got to learn that software. So
Which is also a great way. Speaking of accountability helps you do things. That can also be very effective.
Necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So it was a lot of Googling things and frantically reading blogs and being like, what do I do? What do I do? But I figured it out, I actually got a raise in the first 90 days there, which is like really cool. Like I was just busting it, and the founder was like, I've just noticed you've done like a really good work. I want, like, we're going to bump you up like to this level already. So that was a really nice, like early success that really made me feel like confident that, okay, I can do this. I'm not an idiot for leaving what I studied in school. Like I can do this. I know what I'm doing. Here's some external validation that proves that. So that was just, that was nice. But it was a lot of reading and figuring things out. I haven't always been able to do this, but I think it's cool and you should try to do it when you can, is to like publish on day one. And they let me do that. And so day one, I wrote a short blog article about something and published it and left the day with new content out there on my very first day. And I was like, yeah, day one published, let's go. Yeah. Can't always do that because, there's a lot of onboarding and stuff. And sometimes they're not ready to hand over the keys. But this place was small enough that they were like, dude, do whatever you want. Here you go. Here's the login for the CMS. Go for it. So I got some day one publishing, which was cool. And that job was another case of just experimenting and figuring out what works. What was really interesting there was that we sold fundraising software for nonprofits, which, as you might imagine, is a difficult business model to sell things to nonprofits, which is always funny because we would get these like sales calls where they would ask for the nonprofit discount. And we're like, no, you don't understand. We literally only sell this to nonprofits. Everything is the nonprofit discount. But our target audience was development officers at these nonprofits, and comes to turn out that there is a certification that development officers like to maintain, and to maintain their certification, they take classes, they show up to conferences, blah, 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 and you earn points for that. And then you get to keep your nonprofit fundraising, initials after your name, for another couple of years, whatever. And so there is a culture amongst those people of attending webinars. That's something they do regularly, is go to webinars. So even if ours weren't associated with the organization that offers these credits, they're just used to the idea of doing that. So we started to put together webinars of how to do online fundraising, or we would bring in guests because there were all these fundraising consultants in the industry that wanted to reach an audience, and we had built our own audience then. So I'd email them and say, hey, we'll have you on as part of our webinar series if you do one of your presentations that you already do at conferences and stuff. And they would do it for free because they wanted access to our audience. And so it worked out really well. So we were doing like a webinar once a week of all these different things. And it was this really cool program to get to build that was really, really successful for us. But the only reason we found that out was just through like testing things. At first I was going just the blog route and trying to have pithy tweets and blah, 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 and realize that doesn't really matter. And I'm spending too much time on that. And then hit this vein of the webinars. Like, this is the ticket to get in front of these audiences. And that worked great. And then you start refining that idea and say, okay, how can I make this even better? We started to have referral hooks in the webinars where after you registered, we'd say, hey, thanks so much. You're signed up for the webinar. By the way, if you would like this free guide that we have, an additional piece of content, all you have to do is email this to someone, email the invite to someone else and carbon copy this email address on it. But just a little instructions, just a really easy thing. And that blew up. We're like 10% of the people that signed up for it were referring it to a friend so they could get the extra piece of content, and that cost us nothing. And then we were, growing the audience that way. And we were like, yeah, it could be your coworker. We don't care. Like, we actually love that for you to email your coworkers and kind of do a land and expand content, a sales process where, I ended up getting this junior employee to sign up for my webinar. But because they wanted the extra content, they forwarded it to their boss, who is a decision maker. And now their decision maker boss is aware of our company and what we do. Like, gold, it was great. So that was like our most successful thing there. And that definitely didn't happen in the first 90 days, but it was just the same story of trying things. And then suddenly you figure out this is the ticket, lean into that and pour gasoline on that.
Love that. And I think it's interesting what you mentioned about, I think it was blog and Twitter just weren't working out for you. I love how if you put too much time into something that's not working, that takes away time from whatever else might be working. It takes away your at-bats on other things. Mm-hmm. At what point did you realize Twitter is not working versus I just need to try a different thing, try a different technique, and maybe this can work?
I'm not sure I could tell you like a specific like moment of realization. It's just after a while of doing something, you just similar to writing advice of kill your darlings, where you might have this thing that you really like and you want to do and you think it's going to work and then it doesn't work. And you just kind of have to say, you just have to be ready to call it, or not necessarily call it. You can still keep working on that. Just redirect some of your time and energy into something else. And then maybe say like, I'm going to put this on the back burner and experiment with this some more, because I still believe that there's something here. I still believe that this is me and YouTube right now, where I'm so like big on YouTube and like trying to tell brands like YouTube is where it's at, because it's the only social network that rewards long engagement. It's not just the dumb lizard brain content. Like, they actually have people putting out 4-hour long videos breaking something down. Like, that's cool, But sometimes I'll work with a brand, or I'm trying to work with it, and it's just not delivering early results, and I have to back burner it. And you say, okay, I'll come back to you later. I'm going to keep working on a little bit of the background, but I need to redirect some attention to this, something else that's being more successful right now. So I'm not sure there's ever like I put this at like, it's officially dead. I don't think any idea is ever officially dead for any creative person, any writer, something like that. You might have an idea that is like your little, did you see the Francis Ford Coppola movie this year, Megalopolis?
I heard a little bit about it, but I've not watched it.
It's like his, like, what he viewed, like this movie he claims he's been working on for 40 years. And it's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen in your life. The only nice thing I can say about it was like, well, I've never seen something like that before in a theater. But I think it's the same for like, even like Hollywood directors, where you're like, you need to deliver things that studios want to pay for and are going to make money, but you still have that idea that you're like, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to keep working on you because I believe in that. It never dies. Any idea you have never really dies. You're just like, okay, put it in the back for now, simmer on it, work on these other things that are more profitable or, deliver value quicker, but I'm going to come back to that. So, it's not like I ever came back to Twitter on or something like in that role, but I think you just have to realize sometimes like, okay, let me come back to that later, just because after a while, it's just not providing the results that I thought it would.
Yeah. I love the principle that I think you're sort of touching on here, thinking in bets. Of, okay, this is something that I think could be interesting, but I'm not seeing success. Let me put 5% of my effort on it. This other thing, I am seeing success. Let me put 50% of my effort on it. It's a great way to approach things.
It is like gambling, right? It's like, if you're trying to make money on an NFL weekend, the way to do it isn't dumping everything on one game on the money line or something like that. It's, spreading out small bets and, over unders and point total, whatever, that is more successful typically for people is to spread the things around, or the roulette wheel. It might be fun to throw $1,000 on a single number. Probably going to work better if you spread out the bets a little bit. Yeah, that's definitely a good analogy for it.
And on that note, how did you know, or when did you know the webinars were the thing that you wanted to pursue further?
That we saw pretty early. I do think when you have like something that's really going to work, there's usually some science really early on that's going to work. That doesn't mean if those signs aren't there, something's never going to work. But I do think when you have a really great thing, you can kind of see right away, like there's an aha moment usually. And it's like, okay, that's the ticket. So the first one or two, I think, just exceeded the number of people that I thought we would get. And I thought, and like got really good feedback. People rated it really helped, send like a survey afterwards. Did you enjoy it? Blah, blah, blah. And got really good feedback on it. Even if it was like a small-ish number, it was bigger than what I expected. I set some really reasonable expectations and I exceeded those. And I was like, oh, okay, let's try this. Let's modify this. And then pretty soon you're having hundreds of people show up for your webinar, where, maybe the first one was 5 to 10, but I was expecting 2 people, there was some early signs there. And that's something I think I've noticed across my career is that when you have those like really good things that are like, you've hit gold, sometimes there's like a early on, like, aha moment of truth. Like this is a ticket. Let's go with this. And not all ideas are like that. Sometimes something simmers for a long time before it's a delicious stew. Other times something hits the pan and you're like, yes, got it. All right. So yeah, that one was pretty early on. I didn't have to let that one simmer too long. It was pretty quickly realized that was a good ticket.
Which is also a helpful takeaway that if I'm sitting on something and like, I don't know if this is a success in the making or something that is not going to work out, the fact that it's not a clear runaway success is probably a good indicator that I should move on to something new and try something different.
Yeah, or just keep it as a back burner,
True. And on that note, I want to jump forward to your next role, Saros. You built a team there that you said was, I believe, loaded with enough talent to make the Warriors envious. Great way of wording it. What have you found?
You're like going through like a LinkedIn descriptions that I wrote a long time. That to show you how long ago I wrote that. That was when the Warriors were like the cream of the crop in the NBA. I was like, wait, the Warriors, like the movie? And I'm like, oh no, that's right, the Golden State Warriors. That was the Seth Curry days and all that. Okay, yeah.
What was your approach to hiring? How did you approach hiring?
That was a role that gave me way too much trust. Or that I did not earn or deserve that early in my career. So that company, I got hired by a really great marketing manager who I'm doing some freelance work for to this day. She ended up moving on pretty early from after I got hired. And the CEO wanted to hire an editor-in-chief, like from a magazine world, like someone with like, 15, 20 years experience from like, Hearst or something like that. And when he put out that role, I was mid-20s. I told him, hey, I would like to interview for that role. Even though I know you're looking for someone with way more experience, I'm like, I promise my feelings aren't going to be hurt. I just want the experience of being able to interview for it. And he's like, okay, yeah, like, look, we're really looking for someone much, much more senior than you. I'm like, I get it. I promise, no hard feelings. Just let me try. Just to try. He's like, okay, yeah, fine. Months pass. They don't find someone they like. They're interviewing, things keep falling apart. One day, my boss is like, hey, let's go grab lunch. And he's like, he's like, we're not going to give you that editor-in-chief title, but how would you basically like to have that job? We'll give you the title of like managing editor and it's yours if you want to try it. I was like, God, yes. I was so excited. And they're like, what do you want to get paid? And I threw out some number that was actually too low, and for his credit, he was like, he kind of smiled. He's like, how about this instead? And I was like, Yes. So, but the coolest part was like, yeah, you get to hire a team. We're giving you a budget. Like, how would you build that? So I hired 2 writers, a growth marketing person specifically focused on growing the blog, not the product, but the blog. Like that was their role. And a designer who was already at the company, but transferred teams over to my team. And I had to like recruit them and all that. And that was so fun. Finding those writers was so cool. Super, super talented. One of them writes for a bunch of like gaming publications now. Just sick. What I did was I stole an idea from a mentor of mine. Shout out to Jay Acunzo. Everything Jay Acunzo does is incredible. Jay worked at HubSpot 10 plus years ago when I was trying to break into startup marketing. And like HubSpot was like the dream job, right? Because they were like it. And I applied for one of their roles, and Jay had he wrote the job description for the job listing. And he has this really smart thing he does where, job listings have like about the company, about the role, requirements, and then all these bullet points. One of his bullet points in his job listing said, attention to detail tests, use the word transform in your cover letter. So I made a video cover letter, which I couldn't even upload on their site, because you can't just link a video or upload a video. It's like PDF only. So what I did was I made a PDF with a link in it, and all the PDF was a blank page that said, I could tell you, but I'd rather show you. And then it had the link, and then they click and they get to watch the video. So I totally growth hacked to that, I was like, I can't upload a video. I can only upload a PDF. No problem. I'll do this, And then in the middle of that video, it's like a voiceover with, I figured some stuff out, telling about how great I am, what a genius I am. And I stopped the music in it, and in the middle of a sentence, I'm like, and transform, and put the word transform on screen and hold it there for like 5 seconds, and then clear my throat and continue with my spiel. Jay sees that and he loves it. He's like, this was so great. This was experimental, blah, blah. I have no experience. I have a music degree, applied. So I ended up getting vetoed because of my lack of experience. But Jay comes back to me. He's like, hey, like, I really believe in you and I want to give you a chance. Like, I want to help you out. And literally for the last 10 years, he's like always had my back and like helped me out with getting interviews or introducing me to people that he knows, or giving me the best recommendations or testimonials that I still use like on my consulting packages and stuff. So can't say enough nice things about him. But yeah, it was that idea of sneaking in the attention to detail test I put into my job listings now, which is not to say it's an automatic disqualifier if someone doesn't do it. But it definitely is like extra points of like, okay, cool, they read it all, and also see how creative they get with it, because this is creative roles we're hiring, So he put the word transform. I like to make it a little harder and more fun for myself, and I put like weird words in there. So mine and this one was like, use the word wiggle in your cover letter. And so sometimes, you just get sentences like, I can wiggle my way around a problem. Some people just write like, I'll get this out of the way right up front, wiggle, and then they do their cover letter. I'm like, okay. Someone put it in a watermark in the background design of their cover letter. It said like wiggle. And I was like, ooh, because I did like a command F, to be like, did they actually do it? And I didn't see it. And then I'm like reading it. I'm like, oh, they did do it. Like they out clevered me, So I love that. And that was really like how I found like some really talented people, because they were just willing to read the details and do something interesting with it. And like one of the writers that I hired, that I ended up staying there longer than I did, and I really, really admire her work, wrote this really funny, honest cover letter where she was like bartending at the time. And she's like, please help me leave the late nights of bartending and give me a chance to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yes, like that's who I want. I want those like hungry people. That was really cool.
That's incredible.
And other roles too, I've got to hire more junior things, or like interns or something like that. And I'm a product of public schools all the way from kindergarten through master's degree. I'm a big believer in public school and all that. And not to disparage people who go to very prestigious schools, but when I was like hiring interns up here in New York, the CUNY, the City University of New York, I'm like, those are my favorite people to hire, because they were hungry, like they had something to prove. And then I'd like hire an intern from like Cal Berkeley, and they like no-showed and just like stopped showing up and just didn't do good work. And not to say like everyone from school, of course, except for those, in my experience, I was like, give me those like public school hungry kids, because that's me. I've fought back on job listings before where they're like, oh, they'll put like a little, most people when they're writing job listings just copy and paste other job listings, and it always like, preferred requirements, this many years experience, a degree in one of these fields, uh, studied at I don't know, they say like a top 25 university or something like that. And I made people delete that. I was like, I don't want that. I don't want, like if you did, great. That's not a requirement for me. Like, are you a hustler? Are you smart? Can you experiment? You don't need to have gone to Harvard or Columbia for that. Like, give me those CUNY kids, give me the state college kids, or, like even like the studied a degree in marketing or business. I'm like, why? Why do I care what someone studied 15 years ago? Like, it's that,
100%.
okay, great. Yeah. Like what have you done since then? Like, what have you, it's like the kid in college or something like that who still brags about his SAT score. It's like, I don't care. What's your GPA right now, man? Like, what are you doing now? Because I know plenty of people who struggled on standardized tests and then out hustled everybody else in college, and suddenly they're the smartest one. Like, I was a music major, right? I was the best musician in my high school. And when I got to college, well, first of all, you get to college and you're a music major, everyone was the best at their high school and you get humbled really quickly. But I was like middle to front of the pack, I'd say, like talent wise, my freshman year, and then quickly got bypassed by everybody because they were just willing to work harder on it than I was. And some of the guys that were like, when they showed up and I heard them play, I'd be kind of like, you're studying music? Like, how did you get in here? After a year, beating the pants off me, way better, because they just worked harder. They were willing to hustle. They wanted it better. They wanted it worse than I did. And so I think that's like a really good lesson to keep in mind, is that, it doesn't really matter what you did back then. It's like, what are you doing right now? Are you willing to work for it? Don't care where you went to school. Give me the hungry people. That's how I found really talented people who were willing to do cool experimental work and try new things. So
That is wonderful. And side note on those like preferred qualifications, I tend to not include any of those in job listings I post either, because it has a really interesting and sort of unexpected consequence that a lot of people will look at it and say, okay, this is preferred. I don't have it. That's fine. I'll still apply. There are also a lot of people who look at it and they might be the person I want to hire, and they'll say, oh, I don't have this preferred listing, and they'll skip. So
from my understanding, there's a gender bias in that too.
True.
Where I've read that, I hate speaking in absolutes, but that more women candidates tend to see requirements and say, like, if I don't meet these requirements, I'm not going to apply, versus male candidates who have benefited from a lifetime of living in a patriarchal society say, like, oh, whatever, I don't meet all of them, but I'm still going to apply. And so then you end up with a bias in your hiring process. And so another reason to remove those things, because, you're going to miss out on some really talented people by doing that.
Facts. So if you're applying for jobs, apply if you meet any of the requirements. If you're hiring for jobs, don't post your preferred requirements unless you really, really want them. That's incredible. So hard pivot. One thing that I found very interesting in your work also is you've talked about gated versus ungated content. And this sort of plugs into what you're saying earlier about webinars. What's your approach when it comes to content marketing on those two areas?
That's what made the webinars really successful, is because you have to gate them. Like it's at a live event happening at a time. I need to send you a link to the live event when it happens. So that was one reason why that was really successful, is because people felt no qualms about doing that. They're like, oh yeah, it's a live event. I have to register for it. Here's my information. Versus like a PDF guide. I think when that was really popular and everyone was doing that, I don't see that as much anymore. Then you had, people who were like, I get to that form and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to put me on their email list. Their sales team's going to be calling me. I'm not worth it. I haven't seen that as much on like the B2B side lately. I'm sure it's still successful in some forms, but I do think the bar is really high for the quality of the content. I'd say it's more like a research project level of data that you're sharing if you're willing to give out your email address for it. It's our report. We surveyed 1,000 HR managers, and here's the 2024 report. Maybe I'm willing to put my information for that. If it's the PDF guide to successful blog titles or something like that, maybe that worked back then. Now I think you're going to have a hard time with that. I've kind of moved my approach to sort of like a land and expand kind of thing, where, like, for example, at Ori, Instagram was definitely where we got the fastest growth, but it was a lot of pretty low quality attention, a lot of not qualified. By a sheer numbers game, it worked out, but we got a lot of non-qualified inquiries coming through our website, international or people who just want to buy one. We sold the furniture to apartment developers because they're buying 50 units at a time or something like that, all in one location, versus selling a one-off to somebody that you have to go install in their house. Wouldn't work. But we had all those people. But what I tried to do was just say like, okay, that's the top of our funnel. We're just getting these people's attention there. And then we're going to get them to lean in with this longer content, like on YouTube or, email follow-ups, tours of apartments, things like that. So I guess the conversion point there, the gated content, is just getting a follow. And then my goal was to get them to engage with us on 2 platforms, whether that was, okay, they follow us on Instagram and they're signed up for our email list, or they follow us on Instagram and they subscribe to our YouTube. Like something where it's like we have more than one touch point with them, that they've sought us out other places. That was my equivalent of the gated content that used to be pretty popular, but I think now in like a B2B setting, if you're going to do that, like you're going to have some really, really good information, like a really well-designed report, an exclusive,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably my views on that now.
And by the way, side note, I was one of your unqualified fellows there. I absolutely loved some of those videos of Ori and the robotic homes. It's incredible. But I also live in Singapore, so I absolutely would not have been buying, unfortunately, anything.
Well, that is that was an interesting strategy decision for Ori, right? Is that when I first started there, we were like, we're selling to apartment developers. We don't really care, not care about, but we're not spending time courting individuals. We need to really appeal to that. And my manager there, a great guy named Ben Funk, really smart, made the case that we're going to have basically a demand gap. If we sell this furniture to all these apartment developers, but people don't know what it is or seek it out, then those developers are going to have a bunch of empty rooms that they can't fill, and they're never going to buy from us again, and the whole thing collapses, right? Which is really smart and intuitive, and kind of went against the grain of like what you'd think like the sales strategy is. They're like, we got to be laser focused on appealing to the people who are our buyers, But his argument was that we needed to be like a B2B to C approach. Like we need people to say, I want that. That's the coolest thing ever. Where can I find that? And yeah, a lot of them are like, I want to buy it. But what we were trying to do is like, good news, you don't have to buy it. You can rent an apartment, because if you buy it, it's going to be really expensive, but you can rent an apartment that has it. And we want people to almost demand that apartments offer it, because they're like, keep seeing this on Instagram and it's all over these other apartments. Like, I want to find a place like that. So then we made like a consumer campaign, even though they couldn't buy from us. And when they rent an apartment, we're not really making money directly off of that. But we want, when those developers installed our product and opened their building, for it to be such a rousing success that they're like, we're going to do this again in our next 5 buildings or something like that. So you say like, oh, I was one of those unqualified people, but I still wanted those followers and those people, as long as they're real people, and not just like robots, because they were the ones that drove this demand interest and gave us like a marketing proof of concept that we could show to buildings too. We could say, because a developer might look at it and be like, oh, do people actually want that? Like, well, here's 1 million people on Instagram who think it's pretty cool, or cool enough that they want to see more of it. It also gave us a really big marketing arm too. When we worked with buildings, we could say, we're going to help you get these units filled because we have 1 million Instagram followers, and I can show you a chart of how many of them live in this city. We're going to start putting that content out. So yeah, I'll take
That's
any
incredible.
and all. It's just a matter of having a filtering mechanism in your conversion funnel, so that you're not annoying your sales team with thousands of unqualified leads. So that was a whole other conversation. Is like, yeah, it's great to have like a big fire hose audience that you're able to tap into. Just make sure you have a filter, an automated filter, so that your sales team doesn't hate you.
Which is interesting, because you're almost running a franchise model without the franchise fees. You're like the central McDonald's selling to the consumer, where they buy at your local McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I never thought about that perspective. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Well, this brings us to the lightning round. I'll throw out some very quick questions. Feel free to give a brief answer, give a longer answer, up to you. First question, long form blogs or short social posts?
Long form blogs. Blog strategy is like has exponential dividends or compound interest. Let me start that one over again. Blog strategy has compound interest. And here's what I mean. And I know you said lightning round. I'm going to try to be really quick. A social post goes viral, and you get that little bump, and then it's gone. Blog strategy, long tail, search stuff starts to build upon itself as you publish more content. So what I was always telling people is like, the reason you want to have a blog is not so you have like one article that has like thousands of search views a day. It's great if you find that. It's going to be rare. Like 1 out of 50 that you're publishing maybe are going to get, more than a couple dozen a day. But what we want to have is a big library of things that get 5 views a day on search. And that you're going to look at that and say like, this article was a failure. It's only getting 5 a day. Okay, but I have 100 of those that are getting 5 a day now. And so now I have 500, organic search leads coming in that are searching for the exact subject that my company's solving. Like, that's gold. And so as you build more and more of those and you keep adding to that library, sure enough, look, it's like your SEO organic search stuff. You're going to start seeing like more of like exponential growth because you're building more and more of those things. So I would always say long form blog over short-term viral social content. That would be my choice.
As someone who first started writing a blog probably at least 13 years ago, I love that answer.
This is also why YouTube is so cool, because it's search-based. It's not algorithm-based. It's not a timeline. YouTube is a search engine. A lot of like social media is moving to like a search engine stuff too. Like you see people call TikTok a search engine all the time, but it's not like the default engagement mode of like I don't open YouTube and be like, ooh, what's up here? I'm opening YouTube because I'm like, what should I cook for dinner? Or I'm, replacing something on my bike and I need to look up the Park Tools video on how to do it. By the way, if you ever want like great content example from a brand, Park Tool, they're like bike tools. They have a series of like maintenance videos with this guy, Calvin Johnson, and every cyclist at least in America, I'm probably the world, knows like Calvin Johnson from Park Tool, so they do like such a great job with that. And sure enough, I'm like, oh, I need this tool. I'm obviously buying the Park Tool brand one, Yeah, like it's a search engine. And that if you're putting out those YouTube videos, yeah, maybe it only gets like a couple watches a day or something like that. But if you have a lot of those and they start to build up, you build momentum behind that.
Love that. Data-driven or gut instinct?
Yeah, I mean, I should say data-driven, but I'd say gut instinct.
In-house team? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's just more of who I am.
In-house team or freelancers?
If you can, in-house team, I think it's always more fun. It's definitely riskier because you're spending a lot more budget. And you have a much bigger target on your head because suddenly content marketing is costing X dollars versus this freelance budget. But having people who are actually like bought in and invested on the mission and, that you're collaborating with every day, I think is just more fun to begin with, but also probably gets you better results if you can afford it.
Early adoption or proven channels?
Early adoption, because by the time a channel's proven, good luck. It's already full, it's saturated unless you're going to do something different.
Love that. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I will roll out the red carpet for you. Where can people hear more about you?
You can go to my website, andrewlittlefield.com, or look me up on LinkedIn and add me and send me a message telling me you watch this. I'd love to chat with you. I am currently not working in-house myself, so maybe I should have said freelance because I'm trying to get people to hire me as a freelancer right now. Let me redo that lightning round and say freelance, specifically hire me. So I'm working with a lot of brands right now, doing some pretty exciting work. Some blog writing, some strategy. What I'm really getting the most juice of out of, as you might have predicted from the way I talk about these things, is like a video strategy and video marketing. And so I have some deals I'm working with, or some people I'm working with, working on like YouTube strategy or just LinkedIn video strategy, some Instagram. But as I have said, like it's not my favorite place to spend time now. And I'm having a lot more fun with the lean in content, the kind of stuff that's like actually engaging and it makes people watch something for more than 15 seconds. So you can check out my LinkedIn or my website and hit me up if you're looking for help with anything early stage startup content marketing. I got you.
Fantastic. Those links will be in the show notes, so make sure to check that out. And thank you. Really appreciate the time, Andrew.
Oh, man, a pleasure. This was a lot of fun.
It really was.